Hello everyone. I really wish I could be with you in person, but let me thank you for giving me this opportunity to say a few words at this really important gathering. You know, I was born loving animals, and by the age of 10, I was dreaming that I would grow up and go to Africa and live with animals and write books about them. And finally, I did save up money, and I got out to stay with a friend in Kenya. And I was lucky enough to meet the famous paleontologist, Louis Leakey. I don't know what he saw in me. I had no degree, we couldn't afford college, but he gave me this opportunity to go and live my dream, to go and study chimpanzees. And so in 1960, I arrived in Gombe National Park, as it is today, in Tanzania, and began the research which just this year celebrated its 60th anniversary, 60 years since I first landed in Gombe to study the chimpanzees. They do turn out, these chimps, to be our closest living relatives. We share 98.6% of our DNA with them, and they're so like us in behavior. And because of this, they helped to break down the belief of Western science back then that we humans are different in kind from the rest of the animal kingdom. And the chimpanzees helped to prove that we humans are not, after all, the only beings on the planet with personalities, with minds capable of solving problems, and above all, with emotions, feelings of happiness, sadness, fear, despair, anger, and certainly feeling pain. So we now know that we're part of the animal kingdom, but we're different, aren't we? And I think the main difference is this explosive development of our intellect. So animals are way more intelligent than we used to think, but only we could design a rocket that goes up to Mars and delivers a robot that takes photos. We know we don't want to go and live on Mars, and yet we, the most intellectual creature to ever walk the planet, are destroying our only home. It is our only home. This COVID-19 pandemic that has prevented me being with you and has caused suffering and economic problems all around the world. The sad thing is that in large part we brought it on ourselves by our absolute disrespect of animals and the natural world. And we've created conditions, for example, the wildlife markets, the intensive animal farming, animals crowded together in horrible conditions, and trafficking animals and their body parts around the world. We've created conditions that make it easier for a pathogen to jump from an animal to a human, where it may form a new disease, a so-called zoonotic disease. It turns out that 75% of all new human diseases are zoonotic in origin. And unfortunately for us, this particular one, COVID-19, happens to be highly contagious, which is why it's spread around the world and caused this terrible pandemic. And it's this same disrespect of nature that has led to the climate crisis with the changed weather patterns, you know, the terrible hurricanes, the storms getting worse, the floods, the droughts, the terrible wildfires all around the world now, and also the loss of biodiversity. We're destroying the two main lungs of the world, the forests and the oceans, both of which absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and give us oxygen. We continue to release CO2 into the atmosphere by recklessly burning fossil fuels. And these so-called greenhouse gases are blanketing the planet, trapping the heat of the sun, heating up the planet, leading to these changed weather patterns. And our farming of billions and billions of animals, and by the way, in very cruel conditions, but they all produce methane gas in their digestion, and that's another of these greenhouse gases that are warming the planet. The reason I left Gombe during the happiest days of my life out in the rainforest was because at a 1986 conference, I learned to my horror that right across Africa, forests were disappearing and chimpanzee numbers were declining. And forest habitats were being destroyed by foreign companies, timber, oil, gas and mining, and by the growing local populations needing ever more land. Chimpanzees were being hunted, sometimes for food, and sometimes to capture babies to sell them on the illegal international animal trafficking, sold for circuses, pets, and so on overseas. In 1960, Gombe was part of the equatorial belt that stretched right across equatorial Africa. By the late 1980s, it was a small, isolated patch of forest surrounded by bare hills. In 1990, when I flew over in a small plane, I was horrified to look down and see this devastation. And there were more people living there than the land could support. Their farmland was overused and infertile. They were cutting down trees in their desperation to grow more food or make some money from charcoal. They were too poor to buy food from elsewhere. And it hit me then, only if we help these people to find ways of making a living without destroying their environment, only then can we hope to save chimpanzees, forests, or anything else. And so the Jane Goodall Institute, JGI, we began in 1990 a program that we called Takari, and it was working with the villagers to design a very holistic program to improve conditions in the villages. And I won't go into that now, there's no time, but it was so successful with its scholarship for girls, its microcredit opportunities for women, its tree planting and so on, that we now have the program throughout Chimp Range in Tanzania and in 6 other African countries where JGI is studying and protecting chimpanzees. So all of these people have now become our partners in conservation because they're understanding that protecting the environment isn't just for wildlife, it's also for their own future, that they need the forests to control, to mitigate the climate and rainfall and so on. And so they've all become our partners, which is the only way we can ensure long-term conservation. Thing is that we're part of the natural world. We depend on it for food, water, for everything. But it's healthy ecosystems that we depend on. And these healthy ecosystems are comprised of the interrelated plant and animal species that make up the biodiversity of an ecosystem. I call it the tapestry of life. And as more and more species, each one playing its role, become extinct, so this tapestry of life becomes increasingly tattered, and eventually the ecosystem will collapse. This is why protecting biodiversity is so terribly important, along with slowing down climate change. I mean, it's crazy to think that there can be unlimited global economic development on a planet with finite natural resources and growing populations of human and their livestock. And already in some places, these resources are being used up faster than nature can replenish them. So it's very clear, isn't it, that we must develop a different relationship with the natural world and a different, more sustainable, greener economy. It won't be easy, but if we don't do it, what is the future like for your great-grandchildren and mine? There is hope we can turn things around. Nature's very resilient. There are no more bare hills around Gombe. The trees have come back. And there are many examples of areas that we've destroyed, given time and perhaps some help, can once again support nature and life. Animals have been rescued from the very brink of extinction by people who care and given a second chance. And People are now using this intellect that we have. Scientists are creating innovative solutions to help us live in greater harmony with nature, solar and wind power and all that sort of thing. And as individuals, people are beginning to try and live their lives more sustainably. And consumer pressure is forcing some companies to make more ethical decisions in how they source their products and how they pay those who are working for them. And finally, there's the energy and passion of young people. I started a program in '91 called Roots and Shoot, which is flourishing in South Korea. And these young people are choosing and acting on projects to make the world better, one for people, one for animals, one for the environment. They are changing the world as we speak. And they're from kindergarten, university, everything in between, even some adults in 65 countries around the world. So there is hope, but there's hope only if we get together to take positive action. And we need to get together now. Thank you.